with Allah's blessed name.
We praise Him and we glorify Him. And He ought to be praised and glorified. And we pray for peace and for blessings on all His noble messengers. And in particular, the last of them all, the blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In our first class, we looked at the Surah
and the Sunnah.
In that connection, we found that the Prophet ﷺ had said, and you have the hadith, to recite the first 10 ayat of Surah Kahf for protection from the fitna of Dajjal. And the second hadith was to recite Surah Kahf on Yawmul Jum'ah, and you'll get no illumination, light, which will stay with you until the next Jum'ah. We have not as yet explained that second hadith. That will come later on in the class. Last week, we attempted to explain our method of approach to the study of the Surah. And believe you me, it is going to be very simple. Simplicity and clarity are the two hallmarks of this class. And at the end of the class, you will say, but wait a minute, there were so many others who could have taught the same thing that he taught. So that you have no excuse at the end of this class for not going out and teach others. There are many approaches to the study of the Qur'an. The first is the traditional. You go verse by verse, starting with number 1, going to the end. And in that we look at the explanation given by the Prophet himself, a hadith, the sayings of his companions and early Muslims, the aakhir, and the historical circumstances surrounding revelation, asbabul nuzul. Then there was the second method, the theological or the philosophical, in which you attempt to explain the ideas, the concepts from a rational way, which are in the Qur'an. The third method was one which concentrated on the literary form of the Qur'an, the construction of the sentences, the use of words, etc. And the fourth one was, these are the main approaches to the study of the Qur'an. The fourth one was that approach in which you attempted to extract out of the Qur'an its laws, the juridical or the juristic approach to the study of the Qur'an. We ended the class by turning to Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari rahimahullah and that excellent chapter of his, which I believe is being circulated today, from his book, The Quranic Foundations and Structure of Muslim Society. I urge you to read that chapter entitled The Style and the Structure of the Quran, in which he points out that the Quran can be approached at different levels for understanding it. The first he calls the common sense level, you remember? And everybody is equipped with the capacity to approach the Quran at the common sense level. For that you need only one piece of equipment, You need your religious consciousness. What is the religious consciousness? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the great programmer, when He created us, at the dawn of creation, He programmed us. The Qur'an tells us that He addressed all the progeny of Adam alayhi salam. And He asked them, what is the question? Anybody? Alastu bi rabbikum? Am I not your Rabb? And everyone replied, Qalu bala. Yes, why not? We do affirm that you are our Lord. That is your religious consciousness. However, there are some people who forget their Lord, and because they forget their Lord, they pay the price of forgetting themselves, and therefore losing their religious consciousness. وَلَا تَكُونُوا Surah Al-Hashr. وَلَا تَكُونُوا, and do not be كَالَّذِينَ, as those are نَسُوا اللَّهَ, who forget Allah, فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ, and in consequence of turning away from Allah, taking Allah out of the political process, taking Allah out of the economy, taking Allah out of the educational system. So Hazel Manning now has a problem, has taking Allah out of entertainment, taking Allah out of sports, taking Allah out of the bedroom, taking Allah out of the kitchen, taking Allah out of all human activity, called secularization. So in the process of turning away from Allah, you forget Allah, and the price that you pay is you forget your own self. So you lose your religious consciousness. Allah says, He sets a seal on the heart, and He sets a seal on the hearing, and He puts veils before your eyes so you can't see. So you could go to the Qur'an as much as you want. The Qur'an is blocked for you. But for those who have not lost that religious consciousness, the farmer, the fisherman, whoever you are, you can approach the Qur'an with the religious consciousness, and you can get the common sense level understanding of the Qur'an. But then Maulana Ansari points to a second level, which he calls, what is it? The probe level, P-R-O-B-E, in which you dig deep. You go beyond the surface meaning, you dig deep. The probe level. And he said for the probe level, you need something beyond the religious consciousness. It's a big word, he calls it the theoretical consciousness. Meaning, you need to use your reason, your capacity for concepts, for ideas, for reasoning. And I added something very small to what my teacher said, theoretic consciousness. We also have to bring the internal, intuitive, spiritual insight to reach to the probe level. But in fact, my contribution is very minor, because the word which the Qur'an uses for the intellect is al-aql. 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 I-A-Q-L Ain Qaf Lam Al-aql. And al-aql, or the intellect, which uses the theoretical consciousness, is not only the mind. The Qur'an says the aql is also in the heart. So, in order to reach the in-depth meaning of the Qur'an, you have to probe into it. And Maulana says that for that, you have to turn beyond the arrangement of the Qur'an, which is the received one, in which you have Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen as the first ayah, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, in this order. or he calls it this sequence, and I use that clumsy word, the arrangemental sequence. I wish someone could help me get a better word than that. He said that in addition to this sequence or this arrangement, I don't know whether the Arabic word nizam, we say nizam. Nizam. Nizam means order or arrangement. Nizam might be the correct Arabic word for the order in which the Qur'an is now arranged. With Surah Al-Fatiha comes first and then Surah Al-Baqarah and so on. He said in addition to this sequence, the Qur'an has another sequence. And that is the sequence in which it was revealed. In which the first revelation up in the cave, Iqra. Iqra. The last revelation which came after the farewell Hajj, he returned to Medina. He now has only about 81 days left in his blessed life. And then came the last revelation in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declared war, he and his messenger, against those who persist in riba, even after the revelation has come down. The fact, Maulana Ansari will argue, the fact that Allah placed this first, Iqra, read, he would say, well, the first implication is that the Muslim community must be totally literate. Would that be the first implication? A Muslim community must be 100% literate to be able to read and write. Fidel Castro took over in Cuba in 1958. And within 25 years, Cuba was 100% literate. Pakistan came into being in 1947 with about 25 or 26% literacy, and it has now fallen to about 16%. Maulana Ansari would say the first implication that Allah chose that as the first revelation is that the Muslim community must be literate, must be able to read and write. And when you have the capacity to read, what is the first thing you should read? And all through your life you should read. Up to the last day you should read. The Book of Allah. The Book of Allah. If you have your PhD in nuclear physics, subhanallah, look at that. You can't read the Quran. Kind of wrong priorities there, isn't it? You've got a degree, you've got a string of degrees in this and that and the other discipline, but you've never yet attempted to study the Quran. Something wrong there. And the fact that the last revelation is on riba, Maulana Ansari would argue that there is a mountain of a warning in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choosing riba as his last revelation. Meaning that the most dangerous attack which can ever be launched on the integrity of a Muslim community, to paralyze you, to enslave you, to destroy you, is the attack of riba. And so Maulana asks that we turn to the big word, the chronological sequence. Chronological, meaning when did this revelation come down? When did this come down? And when did this come down? Finally, he says that you must not study the part without relationship with the whole. For him, the whole is more than simply the sum of the parts. And of course, he's not the first to argue that. Many other distinguished scholars argue the same thing. That you must first locate the thread which binds everything together in an integrated, harmonious whole. And what does he call that thread? Yeah, see? That which binds everything together, the whole, what does he call it? The system of meaning. Because he wrote this book in the English language, I don't know what is the Arabic equivalent for system of meaning. And Maulana is no longer in the world, so I have to guess. The system here would be nizam, and meaning ma'ana, nizam ma'ana, system of meaning. The system of meaning, he says, of the whole Qur'an must be located. The system of meaning of a whole surah must be located. And then after you have discovered that system of meaning, then you go to the study of the Bab. This is where we ended the last class. I want to add something now for you to think about, and for me to also think about. And that is that in Surah Al-Nahl, Surah number 16, and the ayah is number 89. Do you remember what Allah says? وَنَزَّلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ تِبْيَانًا لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ وَهُدًى وَرَحْمَةً وَبُشْرَى لِلْمُسْلِمِينَ. And we sent down the book, the Qur'an, sent it down on thee, O Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, in order that this book might explain all things. In order that this book might explain all things. And in this book there is guidance, and that explanation and guidance is rahmah from Allah. And for those who submit to it and utilize it, bushra lakum, good news, glad tidings for such people, the Muslims. But in order for the Qur'an to explain all things, the Qur'an must explain the unfolding historical process. History as it is unfolding until history reaches its climax. The Qur'an must explain that. And so no one could ever have in his lifetime the totality of the knowledge of the Qur'an. Could there new knowledge come in? Huh? So that's the first problem we have. Is that we may look at the Qur'an, we may look at the surah, and we may say, well, this is the central theme of this surah. And lo and behold, 100 years later, as events unfold, the Qur'an reveals new meaning, new knowledge coming out. And so what you said was wrong, because you didn't have the totality. A second ayah of the Qur'an, it is in Surah Al-Hamim Sajda, Surah number 41, and the ayah is number 53. And Allah says, سَنُرِيهِمْ, we shall show them ayatina, our ayat, our signs, our messages, fil afaq, in the distant horizon, the external world out there, wa fi anfusihim, and in the human universe. Our signs shall constantly be unfolding out there in the external universe, the material universe, and here within the human universe. Hatta, as these signs unfold, hatta yatabayyana lahum annahu al-haq. As these signs unfold, they will confirm with absolute certitude the truth of the Qur'an. In other words, the Qur'an is saying new knowledge will constantly be coming into the world. The frontiers of knowledge will constantly be extended. And as the frontiers of knowledge are extended, they will confirm what is in this book. So none of us can say that we have a grasp of the total message of the Quran. None of us. It is always partial. And whatever grasp that we have of the Quran, partial, is what Allah chooses to bestow. Remember what we just recited? Allah la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum la ta'khuzuhu sinatun wa la nawm lahu ma fi as-samawati wa ma fi al-ard man dha alladhi yashfa'u 'indahu illa bi-idhnihi ya'lamu ma bayna aydihim wa ma khalfahum. And then wala yuhituna, ahata yuhitu, to embrace. Wala yuhituna bishay'in min ilmihi illa bima sha'. You cannot grasp anything of Allah's knowledge, and the Quran is Allah's knowledge, except as Allah permits you to do so. And so the goal of ever achieving a total grasp of the totality of the Quran is something that will elude every human being. We can only have partial grasps of the Quran. We said that our approach to the study of Surah Al-Kahf is one in which we will concentrate on how the surah explains the modern age. And in that connection, we are concerned with what the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, in which he linked Surah Al-Kahf with Dajjal. In order to get into this probe level, we turn now to the chronological sequence of the revelation of the Quran, of the surah. At the beginning, the Prophet ﷺ engaged in private preaching. And then he went public. When he went public, it eventually resulted in a boycott, which lasted for 3 years. They would not buy from us, they would not sell to us, they would not marry our women, they would not give us their women to marry. The Qur'an. And then at the end of that boycott, Abu Talib died. This is the year 10. So far the tribe, Banu Hashim, was under the leadership of Abu Talib. So the tribe was protecting him. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But now Abu Talib is dead. And who take over the tribe? Huh? Abu Lahab. Abu Lahab take over the tribe. He is now the new leader. So the protection which was there is no longer there. So now he seeks protection by traveling to Kahf. And then you know what happened in Kahf? They stoned him. Blood is flowing from his body. We never get one stone in our lives. But he is the messenger of Allah. And then after his return from Kahf, this is the lowest point in his mission. 11 years of work by the last messenger of Allah. And it seems as though we reached dead end. But he is not given up hope. No. It is at this moment of despair, it is at this moment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him the Miraj. And he sees all of this to come. He sees everything. This is the year 11 after the call. After this comes in the month of Dhul Hajj of the year 11, the first pledge of Aqaba. And then again in the month of Dhul Hajj in the year 12, the second pledge of Aqaba, the invitation to come to Medina from the house of the Khazraj. And then in the year 13, in the month of Rabiul Awwal, the Hijrah to Medina. So this is 13 here. This is 13. And this is 12. And this is 11. And now from here begins Hijri calendar after the Hijrah. So once the year 1 starts. It is somewhere over here in the year 11, between the year 11 and the year 12, that Surah Kahf is revealed. And Allah knows best. One can never be absolutely certain of these matters. What are the circumstances surrounding the revelation of the Surah? The Quraysh have been placed on the horns of a dilemma. They don't know what to do. They have tried everything that they could try to resolve the problem of a man who grew up in their midst, who was given a place of honor and esteem amongst his fellow men because of his honesty and integrity. They called him Al-Amin, who was married to a wealthy woman who had a very high status in the society, and that increased his status. He lived an exemplary life, and then suddenly, at age 40, he never worshipped the idol, they noticed that. At age 40, a man who could not read and could not write, a man who had never composed any poetry in his life, was not a poet. And now Arabia is challenged on the battleground where Arabia considered itself most powerful. A new message comes which declares that the worship of the idols is false. There's only one God. He's not only the God of Makkah, but he's the God of all the rest of the world. What are you talking about? No. We must have our own God. Let them get their own God. It's our God. Are you coming and telling us that our God is also the God of all the rest of mankind? We can't take that. Something stunning to them. And the God who is the God of all mankind is a God who has given rights to all human beings. And so this system of dominance in Arabia, economic dominance, in which an elite enslaved people and utilized slave labor, was something abhorrent. Then women had no rights at all. Women were like chattel. You buy them, you sell them, you inherit them. You use them, you discard them, you dispose of them. Not at all. The new message says no. Women have rights similar to men. Arabia was stunned by this. And this man who is delivering this message now speaks, and from his mouth emerges verses. The Quraan, which he says are revealed. But the literary form, the eloquence, the excellence of what comes out of his lips is such that Arabia has no response, can't answer. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq khalaqa al-insana min 'alaq. Rhyming. Iqra wa rabbuka al-akram alladhi 'allama bil qalam. Rhyming. 'allama al-insana ma lam ya'lam. Rhyming. In just a few sentences, the first revelation throws out a challenge. Come on. If you doubt the authenticity of this claim that this is from God, this is not the work of any human being, this Quran, come on, produce a surah like one. Come on, bring all your poets together. They couldn't do it. How to respond? They tried to buy him. They offered him money. Still going on. All around the world, people are for sale. People are being bought. Huh? Still going on. But no, not Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala. You can't buy this man. And those who truly follow the messenger of Allah, you can't buy them. Then they offered him, but we make you our king, our ruler. No. Then they said, well, we give you the most beautiful girl in all the land as a wife. No. He responded, he said, even if you put the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left, I will not give up this mission. What to do with this man? Then they imposed a boycott. They persecuted his followers. So some of them had to leave, the ones who were weakest had to leave and make hijrah and go to Africa. Black, Christian Africa, not white, black. And then they imposed a boycott. All of these things, and they could not succeed. And so then they decided, okay, let us send a delegation to the rabbis in Medina. Because we tried everything, nothing has worked. Let's ask them, how can we determine whether or not he is indeed a true prophet of Allah? They knew about Abraham alayhi salam. They commemorated the Hajj which was established by Ibrahim alayhi salam. Even though they were worshipping idols. They circumcised, not female, male circumcision. And they derived it from Ibrahim alayhi salam. So even though while they were worshipping idols, they made the Qurbani every year. And they made this Qurbani in commemoration of that Qurbani. Ibrahim alayhi salam and his son Ismail alayhi salam. They did it even though they were worshipping idols. And they made i'tikaf. Every year they made i'tikaf. Because i'tikaf had come from Ismail alayhi salam, part of the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So they had links with the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So they said, let's send to the Jews, the rabbis, and ask them, how can we tell whether this man sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam is indeed a true prophet of Allah? Like unto Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam, our father, the Arabs. The rabbis responded. And the rabbis said, ask him 3 questions which only a true prophet can answer correctly. If he answers them correctly, and the rabbis are saying, hey, that's not possible, he can't do that, he's not a Jew. If he answers them correctly, then he's indeed a true prophet. And if he does not, then he's a rogue. So you form your opinion of him. What were the 3 questions which only a prophet could answer? Remember that the Jews had lots of prophets who came to them. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that there was never a time from the time of Nabi Musa alayhi salam to the time of Nabi Isa alayhi salam when Banu Israel did not have a prophet with them. Continuously they had prophets. So these prophets must have communicated to Banu Israel information which only a prophet would know. So they said, ask him about the young man of old who fled into a cave, had a wondrous story. And ask him about the great traveler who traveled to the 2 ends of the earth. And ask him about the ruh, asking about the ruh. Wow. The body would be the jism, the self, that is the I, the self would be the nafs, N-A-F-S, nafs, J-I-S-M, jism. The body would be the jism, the self would be the nafs, and the spirit or soul would be the ruh. Alright? I'm using Maulana Ansari's terminology here. Ask him about the ruh. These are the three questions. Now, you need to be more than a historian to answer this. If only a prophet could answer it. So the delegation came back. We actually have the names of the members of the delegation. The delegation came back to Makkah, and then the Quraysh posed the questions to the Prophet ﷺ. And he said, I will answer you tomorrow. And he forget to say? You forget to say? Insha'Allah. I don't think he forgot. I think Allah caused him to forget. It didn't happen by accident. And Allah knows that. So the next day, when they came to him for the answers, he said, well, Jibreel alayhi salam didn't come. I don't have the answers. I have to get the answers. And then the next day, again no answer. And then the next day, again no answer. And now the Quraysh began to rejoice. Aha! This is victory. They're smelling victory now. After all these 11 years of struggle, now we have him. Because he can answer the question. 2 weeks passed. And the Muslim community is in a state of consternation. Some Muslims left Islam during this period of time. After 2 weeks, then Jibreel alayhi salam came. And he answered question 1. And that answer was placed in Surah Kahf. And he answered question 2, and that answer was placed in Surah Kahf. But question 3 was answered in a very terse form. Very terse, brief, concise. And that answer was not put in Surah Kahf. It was put in the surah before Surah Kahf. And nothing happens in the Qur'an by accident. What was the answer to question 3? You'll find it at the end of Surah Bani Israel, which is Surah number 17. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ. And they question thee, O Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, about the ruh. Now this is a tricky question. Why? Because Allah says in the Qur'an about ruh, that after He took the mud, water, mud, created man, Adam alayhi salam, He said, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ ruhi, and I breathe it into him of my ruh, of my ruh. So Allah possesses ruh. What is this ruh that Allah possesses, that He breathes into mankind? And then the human being also now possesses the ruh that Allah breathed into it. So this is ruh, and that is ruh. And then تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. On that night, Qadr, Laylatul Qadr, تنزل الملائكة, the angels come down, والروح, and the ruh also comes down. Which ruh? Jibreel alayhi salam. So Jibreel alayhi salam is also described as ruh. He's known as Ruhul Amin. He's also known as Ruhul Qudus. For example, Nabi Isa alayhi salam could walk on water. You don't try to do that then. He could walk on water. Huh? He could cure those who are blind and restore their sight. He could cure the ones suffering from leprosy and so on. How could he do all these things? The Qur'an says, وَأَيَّدْنَاهُ بِالرُّوحِ الْقُدُسِ. We strengthen him with the Holy Ghost. The Christians call it the Holy Ghost. Jibreel alayhi salam. Because of this, he could take mud, shape it in the form of birds, blow into it, and by Allah's leave they become living birds and fly away. So you have ruh, which is a human spirit. You have ruh, which is the divine spirit. You have ruh, which is Jibreel alayhi salam. The Hindus speak of Atma, the human soul. They speak of Param Atma, the divine soul. And they say that it is the destiny of mankind, when once they can escape from the cycle of constant rebirths, to be reabsorbed into Param Atma. So now, what is ruh? Tricky question. The answer comes down, قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. Say to them, say this to them, say only this to them, say nothing more than this to them, that the ruh is by Allah's command. وَمَا أُوتِيتُمْ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. And we have not given you knowledge of this subject except a little bit. This is the answer to question 3. Why is this answer put in Surah Bani Israel? But the other 2 answers are put in Surah Kahf. I want to suggest, if I may, that the fact that the divine wisdom separated the answers, this one over there and these 2 over here, indicates that there is something different which separates this question from these 2. What could that be? And now I'm giving you my opinion. And of course, whenever I give my opinion, you're free to accept, you're free to reject, and Allah knows best. The question is, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put one answer over there and the other 2 here? In attempting to answer that question, you must first go to the great traveler. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنْ ذِي الْقَرْنَيْنِ. And the question be about Dhul Qarnayn. Qarn means a horn. So Qarnayn means 2 horns. Daniel is supposed to have had a dream with two horns. But Qarn can also mean an age or an epoch. So Qarnayn, two ages. A man who impacts on two ages. Zulkarnain possesses power. Allah has endowed him with power to pursue any objective he wants to pursue. So he is the superpower of the world. But Zulkarnain also possesses faith. So with Zulkarnain, power rests on the foundations of faith. He travels in one direction, to the west, and we're going to have a detailed look at this. And then he travels in a second direction, the east, and the answer is given. Because the question was, the man who traveled, a great traveler, has traveled to the two ends of the earth. But the answer does not end there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to speak about a third journey. And in that third journey, the subject of Gog and Magog is introduced, which indicates that Allah's judgment, Allah's wisdom, He knew that when they asked about the two journeys, in fact, they wanted to know whether He knew about the third journey. And therefore whether He knew about Gog and Magog. And Gog and Magog is something which only a prophet would know. One of the 10 major signs of the last day. And so now we know, while question 3 was a direct question, the target of the question is direct. It's tricky, but it's direct. Question 2 was not a direct question. The target of the question was not directly approached. Rather, it was indirect. Tell us about the great traveler who traveled to the two ends of the earth. Whereas, in fact, they wanted to know about the third journey. They didn't ask about it. And in the third journey, they wanted to know whether he knew about Gog and Magog, one of the major signs of the last day. From this, I understand that since this is put in Surah Kahf, question 1 about the young man in the cave would be a similar question to question 2. Namely, the target of the question is not directly addressed. They're asking about the young man in the cave, whereas in fact they want to know whether he knows about something else. One of the major signs of the last day. What could it be? The Prophet it is who told us, recite Surah Kahf for protection from Dajjal. And so my opinion is that these two questions are in this surah, and that question, the answer is in that surah, because Allah is telling them, I know the difference between this one and these two. This one is a direct question requiring a direct answer. These two are indirect. And the real target of these two are Gog and Magog and Dajjal. When we come back next week, inshallah, we're going into the very interesting part of this subject now, where we're going to look into the answers given in the Qur'an. This is our preliminary look, because later on we're going to go even deeper. A preliminary look into the answers given to question 1 and question 2. قبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا رب. praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we glorify Him as He ought to be praised and glorified. And we pray for peace and for blessings on all His noble messengers. And in particular on the last of them all, the blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Before we proceed with today's class, few announcements. First of all, I would like to complete the class by the end of June, because I'd like to travel the beginning of July, inshallah, on a lecture tour, which means we have 16 classes left after today. I'm going to try my best to fit everything into those 16 classes, inshallah. So the last class would be at the end of June, inshallah. Number two, the Imam has kindly consented that the Jamaat will stand for Salatul Isha at 7:45. The Azan will be at 7:40. So when you come to the class, make sure you have your wudu. If you need to refresh your wudu, go and do it. So from the class, you go directly into the Sunnah and then the Salat, inshallah, at 7:40. And finally, before we begin today's class, let us revise once again the 10 major signs of Yawmul Qiyamah. Remember the word Yawm means day. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word day, He does not necessarily mean the day as we know a day. For example, He says in the Quraan that there is a day with Him which is like 50,000 years by your counting. And He says in the Qur'an that there is a day with Him which is like 1,000 years by your counting. He says in the Qur'an that He created the heavens and the earth in how many days? 6 days. And He says in the Qur'an that He created the earth in 2 days. Obviously, these cannot be days as we know them, because these days came into being only after the creation of the heavens and the earth. So Yawmul Qiyamah, the day of Qiyamah, is not, it's a fleeting moment in time, but a day which can last for a long time. Qiyamah means the day of the great catastrophe, the great upheaval, which will herald the end of the world as we know it. And then there would be the Ba'athu Ba'ad al-Mawt, the resurrection. The earth will now be transformed into an earth which will be different from this, ghayr al-ard. And the heavens will be transformed into that which will be different from this, ghayr al-ard was samawat. A new world will come into being when we are raised back to life. But before that, ba'athu ba'd al-maut, you have the Qiyamah, Yawmul Qiyamah, the day of Qiyamah, which therefore can be a long period of time. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned these as the major signs of Qiyamah. Obviously, these cannot take place in 24 hours. Okay? When we give these 10 major signs, I forgot to mention it, I don't know whether I mentioned it, we're not giving them in the order in which they occur. No, because the Messenger of Allah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam did not give us these signs in the order in which they will occur. So we don't know the order in which they will occur. Number one is Dajjal, Al-Masih al-Dajjal, Dajjal, who will impersonate Al-Masih, the Messiah. We have one entire class devoted to an introduction to Dajjal, inshallah, soon. The Christians call him the Antichrist. Number two, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, Gog and Magog. And today, we're going to get the first introduction to Gog and Magog. Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Number three, the return of the son of Mary. Number four, smoke, Dukhan, which is the name of one of the surahs of the Qur'an. Number five, Dabbatul Ard, a beast of the earth. Ard means earth, Ard means land, Ard means territory. Many times the Qur'an uses the word Ard in the context of the last day, and it means the Holy Land. So this could mean a beast which will emerge out of the Holy Land. Number six, that the sun would rise from the west. We have not as yet attempted to explain that in this class, have we? No. Number 7, 8, and 9, three movements of the earth, three landslides, the earth opening and swallowing what is swallowed. One in the east, one in the west, and the third one in Arabia. During the question and answer period we had last week, this question was answered. Was it not you who questioned? No. Somebody asked the question, and we answered about the third of these three signs, the one in Arabia, the one in the east, one in the west, and one in Arabia. We can repeat it again today. And number 10, that a fire will come out of Yemen and would drive people to their place of assembly, Hashar. That place of assembly is described by Nabi Muhammad ﷺ as the plain of Arafat, where they just had the Hajj. Now let us come to the subject of today's lecture, having revised these 10 signs, major signs. The Quraysh decided, when everything they had tried had failed to stop Islam, they decided, well, let us send a delegation to that city to the north, which was then called Yathrib. Now today it's called Medina. And let us ask the rabbis, because they are the ones who know about the subject of prophets and scriptures and so on. Let us ask them, how can we tell whether this man, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, is indeed a prophet, like unto Abraham alayhi salam, Moses alayhi salam, etc. The delegation went, and in your handout you have the names of the people who went. And the rabbi said, ask him these three questions, which only a prophet can answer. Hence, these questions are such that the answers, the data that you need, is not to be found in the books of history. The data that you need for answering these questions comes down only from Allah directly in revelation. So only a prophet can answer these questions. Ask him about the ruh, and we mentioned last time that this is a tricky question, because the ruh is the human spirit, the human soul. But if we speak of the human self, what word would we use? Not ruh, would we use? Nafs. Nafs. And human body would be jism. Jism. So ask him about the ruh, could be the human spirit or soul. But it could also be Jibreel alayhi salam. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها. On that night, Laylatul Qadr, the angels come down and the ruh comes down. Over here, ruh would be Jibreel alayhi salam. And then the third possible answer, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created mankind from mud, from water, then from mud, he said, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. And then I, نَفَخْتُ, I breathed, first person singular, I breathed into him of my ruh, my ruh. So a divine ruh, a human ruh, and the Holy Ghost of Jibreel alayhi salam. Tricky question. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers, and the question is located in Surah Bani Israel. Surah Bani Israel, which is Surah number 17. It is also known as Surah Al-Isra. Two names. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ. Translation. And they question thee, Yani O Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam in parenthesis, and they question thee about the ruh. Kul, say to them, say, and in parenthesis to them, Kul, say, O Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, give them this answer. Kul, Kul ruhu min amri rabbi. Say that the ruh is by Allah's command. That is a brief answer, you will never get that. Say that the ruh is by Allah's command, which covers all three possibilities. وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. And we have not given you of knowledge, meaning of this subject in particular, knowledge in general, إِلَّا قَلِيلًا, you got only a little bit of knowledge. One would have expected that the rabbis, having given the questions, would show an interest in the answers which are given. Yet very strangely, after the Hijrah, and this is an event which takes place before the Hijrah, after the Hijrah and the Prophet ﷺ arrives in Medina, there are Jews who come up to him and ask him the same question. Why? Because the answers had not been communicated to the people. The rabbis concealed the answer. The Prophet ﷺ then repeated what had come down, that the ruh is by Allah's command. And of knowledge we have not given to you but a little. So they ask, when Allah says that you've been given only a little bit of knowledge, is He referring to us, the Jews, or to them, the pagan Arabs? The Prophet ﷺ replies, it's both. He's referring to both of you. Now here are people who believe that they have an exclusive relationship with Allah. They are the chosen people of Allah. Heaven is reserved for them. They are the elite of mankind. And for them to be bracketed with the pagan Arabs who they consider to be an illiterate people like cockroaches, and to be told that both of you are in the same boat, you don't have any real knowledge about this subject, is certainly a matter that cuts them down to size. And then came question 2. Ask him about the great traveler who traveled to the two ends of the earth. The answer came down. Did we mention last week about the Insha'Allah business? We did. We don't have to repeat that. The answer came down, but by divine command, the answer is now located in Surah Kahf, not Surah Bani Israel. Again, when responding to the question, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses exactly the same language. Over there was, and they asked thee about the ruh. Say to them. Over here is, and they asked thee about Dhul Qarnayn. قُلْ سَأَتْلُو عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْهُ ذِكْرًا. Say to them, I'm going to tell you part of the story. And so there is clearly a similarity between question 1 and question 2. Because the answers begin in the same way. But there's a difference in that the answer to question 1 is put in Surah Bani Israel, and the answer to question 2 is put in Surah Kahf. So now we have to find out what's the difference and what's the similarity. And then comes question 3. Ask him about the young men of old. Disappeared in a cave. The actual text of the question is located in your handout. The answer comes down to this question, but Allah does not say, and they question thee about the young men. Say to them. No, that is not there in the answer. But the answer is located in Surah Kahf. So there is a similarity between question 2 and question 3. In that both the answers are located in Surah Kahf. But there is a difference between question 2 and question 3. And that difference is highlighted in the fact that the way that Allah answers the question is different. Alright? Now let us attempt to locate the similarities and the differences in these 3 questions. To locate the similarity between question 1 and question 2, is simple. The answer is provided in direct response to the question. You want to know about the roof? Here's the roof. You want to know about Zulkarnain? Here's Zulkarnain. Therefore, what you want to really know about the third question is not the same as question 1 and 2. Something different about question 3. You want to know about Ruh? Here's the answer. You want to know about Zulkarnain? Here's the answer. What is it therefore that's different about question 3? We'll have to locate. Now for the difference between question 1 and question 2. To locate the difference between question 1 and question 2, we have to examine question 2, the answer given. Ask him about the great traveler who traveled to the 2 ends of the earth. And so the Qur'an responds and identifies the great traveler as Zulkarnain. This is not a name, it's a title. Zul means the one who possesses. Karnain means 2 karn. Karn can mean a horn, karn can mean an age or an epoch. So the one who possesses 2 horns. When we go back in history and we try to find out is there anything in history about 2 horns, the first answer that usually comes, is about the prophet Daniel, who had a dream connected with 2 horns. But is the Quran speaking of 2 horns here or 2 ages? Because Karnain could be 2 ages. We'll have to try to answer that. So, the one who possesses 2 horns or the one who impacts on 2 ages? He is a servant of Allah, possessing faith in Allah, a believer. But Allah has bestowed upon him power. A power to pursue whatever objective he chooses to pursue, and therefore a superpower, a ruling power. When power rests on the foundations of faith, and that power rules the world, how will power be used? Let us repeat. When power rests on the foundations of faith, faith in Allah, and that power rules the world, the ruling power, ruling state in the world, how will power be used? Zulkarnain travels in the direction of the setting of the sun, which is west, until he comes to a big expanse of water. So that's the farthest west that he can go. It's not shallow water, it's very deep water, murky water. And the Quran says that he came across a people. And Allah asks, how are you going to deal with these people? When power rests on the foundations of faith, how will power be used in relation to people? Zulkarnain replies and he says that those who are guilty of acts of dhulm, oppression, injustice, wickedness, I will punish them. And so power will be used to punish the oppressor. Don't forget that. Keep that stocked away. Power will be used to punish the oppressor. And when the oppressor goes back to you, you will punish him as well. So you're getting it here, and you're getting it there. Which means that when power rests on the foundations of faith, there will be an essential harmony between this world here and that world there. What a world that would be. Those, on the other hand, who have faith and whose conduct is righteous, not just faith, but faith and whose conduct is righteous, I will treat them nicely. They will be rewarded, and I will treat them nicely. And so when power rests on the foundations of faith, that power is used to protect and preserve and sustain the godly and the righteous. What a world! What a world! The Qur'an then describes the second journey. He now travels in the direction of the rising of the sun. And there he comes across a people, لَمْ نَجْعَلْ مِنْ دُونِهِ سِتْرًا, for whom we have not provided any other protection from the elements, any other covering than the bare coverings that they had. In other words, a people living at a subsistence level. Trinidad has the ever-expanding phenomenon of squatters. And those who have a stake, who are stakeholders in the state, wish that these squatters could just disappear. They're like a fly in the ointment. They make us look bad. They make our experiment look like a failure. These squatters. Huh? The Qur'an describes Zulkarnain coming across a people for whom we had provided nothing more than this as a covering. Sitr, to cover. Satar, the one who covers. Oh Allah, kindly cover our sins. Satar, sitr, covering. So a people living a primitive way of life is also a possibility. Or a people living at a subsistence level. Last year, was it April, we went Bangladesh? April? Yeah, I think it was April last year. My wife and I went Bangladesh. And they took us on a drive from Dhaka way down to the south of the country, the sea coast, Cox's Bazar. And then along the sea coast way down to the border with Burma. And when we went to Cox's Bazar, we saw the beaches. 80 miles of beach, one long stretch. And there we found the Muslims from Burma who'd been thrown out of Burma and are now refugees. Bangladesh is already poor. They have nothing to share with those who are refugees, because riba has ripped the Bangladeshi economy dry. And we saw these people living on the beaches. They don't know where tomorrow's food is going to come from. Allah feeds them the way Allah feeds the birds. And we saw these little children, 7, 8, 9 years of age, becoming experts of getting from the sea their sustenance. Experts in getting the shells and the conchs and the baby shrimps that they will sell for 2 takas or 3 takas or so. And they will work, collecting this, praying in the waves of the sea. And I said to myself, look at that. Here the poorest of the poor. Here are those who don't know where tomorrow's food is going to come from. And what a wonderful life these people have. I never had a childhood like that. Every day you're there on the seashore. Whenever you want to go and swim, you play. A wonderful life. Allah took care of them. When you meet the people living at a subsistence level, but they're comfortable with their life, they're making do, Allah is providing for them. And you have power. Your power rests on the foundations of faith. How are you going to interact with these people? Are you going to drag them into modernity? Pick them up and put them in Goodwood Park? Zulkarnain has the good sense, has the wisdom, has the compassion to leave them as they were, not to disturb them. Now that is wisdom, not to disturb them. The good sense, the wisdom, and the compassion to leave them as they were. Now this should have been the answer, because the rabbis had asked about only 2 journeys. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to give a 3rd journey, because He knew that the real target of the question was not journey 1 and journey 2, but journey 3. He now travels in a 3rd direction, which is neither east and nor west. And we will eventually eliminate south as well when we take up the subject in detail, not today. So the only thing that remains now is north, the northern direction. He travels in a 3rd direction, and there he comes across the people لا يكادون يفقهون قولا, whose language could not be understood. For a man who travels with his army across the then known world, to come across the people whose language was not known, would indicate that here are people who have lived isolated from the rest of mankind. Isolated from the rest of mankind. Now that is absolutely, crucially important information. The people who have lived hitherto isolated from the rest of mankind. There have never been any interaction with the rest of mankind, like for example trade, business and trade, traveling for trade. These are people who have never walked on the stage of history. Who are these people? When they were eventually able to communicate, pick up some of the language, these people now address Zulkarnain, who is the superpower in the world. And they say to him, O Zulkarnain, Inna Ya'juj wa Ma'juj mufsiduna fil ard. Surely Gog and Magog are perpetrating fasad in the earth, which means in our territory. Fasad means corruption, oppression. Oh, wait a minute now. In answering question 2, the Quran goes beyond the first journey and the second journey to speak of a third journey. Because the real target of the question is not answered in the first journey or the second journey. In answering the question, the Qur'an, in going to the third journey, now speaks about Gog and Magog. Ask him these three questions which only a prophet can answer. Meaning, this is information which comes only from Allah. You can't find it in textbooks, in history books. So now we know. The real target of question 2 is Gog and Magog. The real target of question 1 was very apparent and plain and clear in the room. Although it was tricky, it was a direct question. A direct question and a direct answer. But question 2 is different. The real target of question 2 is concealed. Allah brings it out by going beyond the 2 journeys to give you the third journey. And the real target is one of the major signs of Qiyamah. Now it's making sense. Only a prophet would know about it. Zulkarnain is asked, can you help us? We're prepared to pay you. Can you build a barrier to protect us from Gog and Magog? Ya'juj and Ma'juj. I gave a lecture on this subject, must have been in Melbourne or in Brisbane in Australia. And after the lecture was over, this man came up to me, probably a university professor or something, and he asked me, don't you have time to speak on other subjects? Can't you direct your attention to other subjects which are to be found in the Qur'an, that you should be talking about Gog and Magog? Why don't you deal with subjects in the Qur'an? The man did not know that Gog and Magog is located in the Qur'an. But this is not surprising. Because if you take a survey, you'd find that probably 99 out of every 100 Muslims know absolutely nothing about the subject. Now, if this is one of the major signs of the last day, and if this subject is dealt with in the Qur'an, would you not feel suspicious? Somebody is at work brainwashing us, directing our attention to here, there, and everywhere, so that we are no longer capable of directing our attention to the subjects that really matter in order to understand. So I had to respond to this pathetic situation, to point out to this man as gently as I could, brother, the subject is in the Qur'an. Can you help us? We're prepared to pay. Can you build a barrier to protect us from Gog and Magog? The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, and we will be giving you a handout with all of these hadiths, inshallah, eventually. Ya'juj is an ummah of Banu Adam. Ya'juj is an ummah means a community of human beings. So they're not some strange creatures with a dozen ears and 2 noses. They're human beings like you and I. Ma'juj is an ummah of Banu Adam. Ya'juj and Ma'juj, the one who is an expert in Arabic grammar, and I am not an expert in Arabic grammar, would see a kind of a complementarity in the 2 words. One the active tense and the other the passive tense. Ya'juj and Ma'juj. But Ya'juj and Ma'juj commit fasad. They have PhDs in corrupting everything. And there is a hadith in Sahih Muslim in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks. This is hadith al-Qudsi. And he says about Ya'juj and Ma'juj, I have created creatures of mine so powerful that none but I can destroy them. And so here are the counterpart in terms of power to Dhul-Qarnayn. The opposite to Dhul-Qarnayn. Over here, power rests on the foundations of faith. Power is used to punish the oppressor. And this establishes harmony between the world here under and the world there. And power is used to protect and preserve and sustain the godly and the righteous, to reward them. Over here, on the other hand, power, similar to that power, superpower, ruling power, rests on foundations which are corrupt. Why should Dhul-Qarnayn build a barrier to protect them? Why can't Dhul-Qarnayn just go and beat the living daylights out of them, teach them a lesson? And if they can't learn, then enslave them. Maybe Dhul-Qarnayn will say to them, oh, I don't need to build any barrier, I'll just go in there and give them the rest of their life and they'll never bother you again. But Dhul-Qarnayn accepts their request. First of all, he says, like Sulaiman alayhi salam said to Bilqis, I don't need your money. What Allah has given to me is far more precious. The servant of Allah is not allowed to say you can't buy him. Dhul-Qarnayn says, help me with manpower. Bring me blocks of iron. Zubarul Hadid. Now we're going to go through the text, inshallah, in succeeding lectures. Today we're only giving you an overview. Bring me blocks of iron. Zubarul Hadid. And he builds this barrier with blocks of iron. Hadid, Hadid, Hadid. There's a surah of the Qur'an named Surah Al-Hadid. And Maulana Fazlur Rahman Ansari points out in his book, The Quranic Foundations and Structure of Muslim Society, it's a footnote, that this surah says, وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدِ, and we sent down hadid, iron and steel. فِيهِ بَأْسٌ شَدِيدٌ, in iron and steel is mighty power. وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ, but mighty power for war making, but also it can be used for beneficial dual purpose. To build bridges with iron and steel, big bridges from Trinidad to Tobago. Maulana points out that when Allah says, and we sent down iron, the implication could be that this metal did not form part of the original constitution of the earth. That the source of this metal is extraterrestrial, like a meteorite. You'll find it in Maulana Ansari's book in a footnote. So this metal, hadid, is used. And he builds the barrier. When the barrier was built, he now told them to blow with your bellows, build a fire for smelting. And now copper is made into molten copper in this furnace. And then he poured the molten copper on the barrier. The engineers say that if you put the molten copper on the barrier, it will prevent rust. This is not my field, metallurgy. When the barrier was built, now Ya'juj and Ma'juj could neither penetrate nor could they scale the barrier. Zulkarnain then said, هذا رحمة من ربي. This barrier is rahmah from my Rabb. Rahmah means an act of kindness. فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي. But when that time comes of which my Lord has warned, جَعَلَهُ دَكَّاءَ. Allah is going to bring down this barrier. When Allah brings down the barrier, then of course Gog and Magog are going to be released. When Gog and Magog are released, then the last day has commenced. Yawmul Qiyamah has commenced. When Yawmul Qiyamah commences, the historical process is going to change. Your tools of analysis must now change. Because the movement of history is going to be different. We had a teacher, a great teacher who taught us at the Alimiya Institute of Islamic Studies. Maulana Ansari brought the best man, Dr. Quraan Ahmad Faruqi. And that man taught us the subject of the philosophy of history. So when I use the term about the movement of history, because this was taught to us as students at that institute, the tools of analysis with which you will now monitor the movement of history now change when once the barrier comes down and Yawmul Qiyamah commences. With this, the answer has ended. Now comes question 3. There is a similarity between question 2 and question 3. The similarity is that both the answers are located in Surah Kahf. But there is a difference between question 3 and question 1, as with question 2 and question 1, meaning that the actual target of the question is not in the question, it's outside. So the young man who fled in the cave, but the rabbis want to get something beyond that. In question 2, Allah gave them what they wanted. They wanted to know whether Nabi Muhammad ﷺ knew about Gog and Magog. Allah gave them the answer directly. What it is they want to know in question 3? Only a prophet can answer. Gibbon wrote in his Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire about this story. Many historians have written about this story. The young man who fled in the cave. But it is a matter about which only a prophet can answer. So very clearly, lurking behind the question is something else. What can that be? Our response is, it may certainly be something located here. Because question 2, this was hidden in the question. What is it therefore that is hidden in question 3? The answer is given by Nabi Muhammad ﷺ when he said, recite the first 10 ayat of Surah Kahf for protection from the fitna of Dajjal. And the first 10 ayat, which will be the subject of one class completely, inshallah, the first 10 ayat take you to the beginning of the story of the young men in the cave. And so we have come to the conclusion, using the logic that we've used, that the real target of question 3 was Dajjal. Yes, Allah answers the question. These are young men who had faith in Allah. Many of the commentators say that they were Christians. If you go into books of tafsir, you will find many of the commentators saying that these were Christian young men. But there's a problem about that. They are living in a world which is waging war on Islam. The world wants them to give up the worship in Allah, of one God, and to embrace shirk. And these are young men who are not prepared to give up their faith. They are prepared to resist all efforts to take away Islam from them. All. When that godless world of oppression which was waging war on Islam left no door open for these young men to live as Muslims, rather than compromise, rather than say, well listen, we've had to cut some corners now to live. They left the world. They gave up the world. And they fled. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes their fleeing. They stopped in a cave. This may have been only a temporary halt. And that after resting for a while, they'll proceed onwards. But when they rested in the cave, they prayed to Allah. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً وَهَيِّئْ لَنَا مِنْ أَمْرِنَا رَشَدًا. O Allah, kindly help us in our predicament. Kindly have mercy on us. And Allah responded and allowed them to sleep. In a subsequent class, we're going to deal with this in detail. Inshallah. And they slept for 300 years, the solar calendar, 309 lunar calendar. The Qur'an pointing out the use of both calendars, solar and lunar. And then Allah caused them to wake up. Why did He cause them to sleep for so long? لِنَعْلَمَ أَيُّ الْحِزْبَيْنِ أَحْصَى لِمَا لَبِثُوا أَمَلًا. The reason why we put them to sleep for so long and then woke them up was so that we would know whether they knew anything about time. The time is an awesomely important subject. If you want to understand the last day, you have to understand time. لِنَعْلَمَ أَيُّ الْحِزْبَيْنِ أَحْصَى لِمَا لَبِثُوا أَمَلًا. To see which one of these groups of young men would understand, would know how long were they there. They were hungry. They sent someone to buy some food. But notice these young men. And whenever I come to this, I always remember Maulana Sheikh Imran Hosein. He said, go with these coins, these silver coins, go down in the village out there, and go and search for that food which is purest food. So anytime I go into the supermarket, you know what? He examining every label minutely. Minute examination of every label to ensure that whatever he buys is halal. That's Maulana Sheikh Imran Hosein. When he went down to buy the food, he then found to his great joy that the godless world was in the garbage bin. Yeah. And a new world had come. The sunshine had come and the dark night had ended. And those who now control the world were people who had faith in Allah. And they then decided, when they learnt about this story, to build a monument to preserve the memory of this event. And that monument was built with the masjid. Here's the story. But having given the answer, Allah goes on to give extra. The rabbis never ask about the dog. No, they never talked about the dog. Allah went on to tell more about the story. Extra, that they took a dog with them. And he spoke about where the dog was lying down at the entrance of the cave. And he described how the dog was lying down with his four paws stretched out in front of it. So, Allah is responding to the question that they asked. They can't say they didn't get the answer. He gave them a lie-up when he answered them. So they cannot complain they didn't get the answer. But they know that the real target of the question was something else. And he does not respond by identifying the real target of the question. He keeps them guessing. And so you will not find the word Dajjal anywhere in the Qur'an. But in this class you will see how Dajjal is described in Surah Kahf. This then is our class for today. We have analyzed the three questions and shown the similarities and the differences, and we've been able to identify the real targets of the question. After the salat, inshallah, if you have any questions, we'll try to address them. رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ وَتُبْ عَلَيْنَا يَا مَوْلَانَا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ التَّوَّابُ الرَّحِيمُ برحمتك يا رب.